The Morton Building, once a popular brewery, now houses 2 theatrical companies and an archaeological research center. But a specter from the past may still walk through the halls, a vigilant officer following his eternal rounds, possibly in search of his killer.
These buildings were originally built in Kingston in 1844 to house the Morton Brewery. By 1867, the man who owned the brewing companies, James Morton, was quite well known amongst people living here as being a very wealthy man. People started to believe that he kept thousands upon thousands of dollars hidden in a safe inside the brewery building. Well, one night in 1867, these men decided to break into the brewery and steal the money from James Morton's safe, led by a young man named Ethan Allen, who had been in trouble with the law in Kingston before. So they crept up to this place at night. They hid under the cover of darkness. They waited for the night watchman to pass by on his rounds. Once the night watchman passed by, the men snuck into the building and they began to work away at the safe. Now, one of the men was kept outside to keep watch. However, he became quite terrified when he saw the night watchman returning. At this point, Ethan Allen became absolutely enraged. He grabbed himself an iron bar. He was going to take care of this night watchman himself. The men did manage to escape Kingston. However, a few days later, they were captured in the United States and they were brought back here. They stood trial, and Ethan Allen was sentenced to hang for murder, and hang he did at the county jail behind the old courthouse here.
Our watchman in the brewery is actually a ghost. He's a man, a poor soul that was murdered while on duty years ago. His spirit remains behind. His untimely death keeps him prisoner of that building.
My name is Anna Robertson, and I'm a producer here at Theatre 5. Well, a number of incidents have occurred here. On one occasion, I was directing an actor. While I was discussing the scene, the back curtains moved by themselves.
So, how was it?
And I just stopped. It threw me off. I didn't know why all the curtains were moving back there.
The Morton Brewery was once the site of a hospital. In fact, actors on a given night in the theater witness a group of ghosts sitting in the audience, watching them. 1 minute they're there, the next minute they're gone.
My name is Justin Robertson, and I've been working at this theater since I was born. And I've seen some pretty weird stuff, I've heard some stuff, and I've had stuff happen to me. During Streetcar Named Desire, I looked over in front of the lighting booth, and that's when I saw these 3 white, figures sitting in the seats. So I just started to freak out, and I, started throwing stuff at them. I was just, shocked. A lot of the stuff that I've heard and seen, I've freaked out, I've screamed, yelled, ran away, had tears out of my eyes, just scares the crap out of me.
Perfectly normal people can see things that aren't there, routinely. You can set up circumstances where people think they saw a person, and it's partly suggestion and partly ambiguous stimuli. So we know that our brains will do that. So the question is, if someone's in an old building with an expectation there might be a ghost, was that what happened? It's certainly explainable that way in terms of what we know about psychology. Of course, you can't say 100% because you weren't there. But the wise person would say, given we know the brain will do that, the brain will play tricks like that quite routinely, then you want more evidence than someone simply saying, well, I saw it, therefore it has to be so.
Nobody wants to spend the night alone here. Any technician that we have working here late feels really uncomfortable, like she is being watched while working. We had a technician here who helped out. Her name was Ashley. She has seen the woman in our large wardrobe.
I was walking down to the big wardrobe during Midsummer Night's Dream to go look for my costume. And I had to go look in the medieval section, and I heard a lot of stuff happen there. So I was just a little bit skeptic, and I just kind of walked up, and I was like, oh, nothing's gonna happen. So I started walking in, and I just looked up, and there was this little white figure just floating there in circles over and over. It was just like an outline of shadow. So I just looked for a costume and then left.
The costumes in this theater are actually genuine clothing of the era stretching back to possibly 100 years ago. So we know that is why a spirit may be attached to a particular shirt or suit, depending on whether it was theirs. So we know that spirits often become attached, have this attachment with an object. It is not unusual, and it happens quite frequently in any museum in this country.
My name is Sue Baisley, and I'm an archaeologist at the Kingston Archaeological Center. The building that we work in is called the Morton Brewery, and I've been working here for a number of years in this particular building, and Samantha, my dog, has been working with me, and she's around all the time. While we've been working here over a number of years, Sam and I have had some interesting experiences with what could be considered some other kind of presence in the building when we were here. What Samantha would do is actually go out to the middle of the room and start barking at what would appear to be nothing, and when I would go out to see what she was barking at, there would be absolutely nothing there, but it wasn't as if she was just barking at a noise. It would be like if there was somebody in the room, it would be like she was actually barking at that person, but I could see nothing. But obviously she could sense something was there, and this has actually happened on more than one occasion. And it usually happens too when nobody else is in the building, it's just the two of us.
Now, sometimes animals will supposedly react to the presence of something. Well, that has to do with our interpretation. If you're in your house and your dog starts to bark, and it's a brand new house and it's not haunted as far as you know and so forth, what will you say? Oh, it must be a cat outside or something. You dismiss it. If you're in an old building, your dog starts to bark or look at a particular part of the room, it's much more easy to see there must be a presence there. It may be mice in the walls scurrying in a way that we humans can't hear, but a dog can hear. It may even make a dog bark. So if we were being reasonable and rational about it, if we really wanted to know, we'd say, okay, let's start getting some hard data here. Let's put in some tape recorders. Let's see if we can find areas where the dog is more likely to bark and so forth. But people don't do that.
Domino Theatre has been in this complex since 1975. I've been involved with the theatre for about 20 years. Now, there is a ghost in this theatre, and I think some people scoff at that idea, but I have heard it and I have seen it. We had a young man running sound in the sound booth. Is up a flight of stairs off for this room. He came down at intermission, a little bit shaken, and said to me, this voice spoke to me. It was garbled, and when I turned around, there was nobody there, but I felt a presence. There was on the door. And when I went to open it, the door pulled against me, and I couldn't open it. Stood back and tried it again. This time the door opened and there was nobody there. So you judge for yourself. I saw an apparition. The stage was empty. By that I mean there was no set on it. And I was sitting in the front row, and a friend of mine was sitting about 4 seats from me. We were chatting. This apparition started. And the apparition was strange in that it was bulky, it didn't have a head, it didn't have any feet, and it didn't have any hands. And I guess I did a real double take, and my friend, who was actually looking the opposite way, looked at me and said, "My God, Ken, what's happened?" And so I told him, perhaps you have to be open to these or willing to accept that maybe these things do exist. I really think that in this world that we live in, there are a lot of things that we can't or don't tune into, and that doesn't necessarily mean they're not there.
We have here a good recipe of hauntings. We have spirits from the hospital, our poor watchman, and again, here we have an archaeological office. Who knows what objects they have there where a spirit is still attached and has remained with that object. It's no wonder that some people walking in this brewery feel uneasy.
Qualicum College opened in the mid-1930s, and in 1937 their new building opened along British public school lines. When it was no longer profitable, it closed and became the Qualicum Heritage Inn, now a favorite holiday destination on mid-Vancouver Island. It's also a place that is very haunted. The original college wing of the Qualicum Heritage Inn is the most haunted, and there seem to be some rooms in particular in that old wing that are the most haunted of all. Over the years, people have reported an array of amazing phenomena in the old wing. Noises like people arguing and shouting in adjacent rooms, and the apparition of a small boy, perhaps 6 or 7 years old, wandering the corridors and then just suddenly disappearing.
I've been working at the Heritage Inn for some time now, and we've had some experiences here that I really just can't explain. One evening, a guest phoned to the front desk, wondering about a young boy wandering through the halls alone. So I went upstairs to check it out. I neared one of the rooms, and I heard crying coming from inside. As I got close to the door, the sound stopped. So I opened the door to check it out, and there was no one there. As I turned to continue back down the hall, I heard a door slam, and when I turned back, there was a young boy standing, staring at me. I was worried he was lost or something, so I followed him down the hall. When I went down around the corner, he was gone. Just disappeared.
The night staff at the Qualicum Heritage Inn seem to have had particular experiences with the ghosts. In fact, so frequently have they encountered the ghost, they've nicknamed the ghost Buddy. It seems that Buddy really enjoys playing with the phone lines, but just at night.
I first experienced the ghost when I had a phone call from the pub after it had been shut up for the evening. Grabbed the night cleaner. We went downstairs and took a look, expecting someone to be inside. Of course, there wasn't anyone there. That was my first introduction to who they call Buddy. Another time I was doing my photocopying. As I'm photocopying, the dining room door opened, shut. 10 seconds later, opened and shut. First thing I did was call the night cleaner to find out where he was to see if he was playing a trick on me. He was downstairs in the laundry room. Seeing as I work graveyard shift and I don't usually see anyone, it's just me, Buddy, and the night cleaner.
A woman and her son checked into the hotel. They're regular guests, and they stayed on separate floors. The woman was relaxing in her room, reading a book, and the woman said she heard sounds like a small child crying. She also heard a man yelling. Then she heard a voice of a woman, possibly comforting the boy. The woman wanted to hear the sounds a little more clear, so she got up and put her ear against the wall. The sound stopped instantly. She opened the door to the hallway and found it empty. She went back and laid on the bed and the sound changed. It became more like chanting, like monks. She found the sound rather hypnotic, and soon she was in a trance-like state. She shook her head, and after that she turned all her lights on and the TV up full blast. I don't think she slept a wink that night.
When she left the room and came down the stairway. And she heard footsteps running behind her. She moved to one side, and when she turned around, there was nobody there.
The woman's son was shaving in the bathroom. The lights began to flicker. He entered the rest of the room, and the lights flickered there as well. He heard sounds of screaming and playing down the hallway, children running about. He opened the door and found that no one was there. He phoned me at the front desk to tell me there was children running through the hallways. I quickly checked the register and informed him he was the only person staying on that floor. The next day, the woman and son compared their stories. They're still regular guests here. They no longer stay in the original part of the building. They like to stay in the new wing.
Well, the Qualicum Inn story is an interesting one because it's one of the few ghost stories without any hangings or any garrotings or anybody dying unnaturally in the building. So as I understand it, here people hear the sounds of boys running and laughing in what was once a boys' school. It would seem to me what's happening is that, again, people are hearing sounds and misinterpreting them, and since the sounds are heard in the context of a place that was once filled with boys, their imaginations tell them that what they heard was children laughing and running and having a good time. If that's what boys in that boys' school did or not, we don't know. But it's interesting, again, to think about how we perceive sound. So, possibly what's happening is as the building cools down, it produces actual sounds that are perceived by the listener as sounds of running or laughing, and then the leap is made. That must be the boys in the school. It must somehow be their ghosts haunting it, because who else could be producing this noise?
A man who was performing in the lounge at the Qualicum Heritage Inn worked very late one evening and decided to sleep in the next day. He set his alarm and it went off. However, he wanted to sleep in, so he was just dozing in bed when suddenly he felt something tugging at his sheets, pulling the sheets right away from him. He tried to ignore it, but a commanding voice boomed out, "Get up!" He obeyed. He said it sounded like the voice of an old headmaster, and of course that's very appropriate for what had been the Qualicum College.
My name is Mike Smollenberg. I'm the sales manager here at the Qualicum Heritage Inn. I was doing the night audit at the desk because I had this feeling that something was watching me. So when I glanced up at this painting, and it was watching. So I moved to one side of the desk. The eyes followed me all the way to there. I moved to the other side of the desk. The eyes again followed me. This kind of was a little freaky towards me, to me, but I still wanted to. I was kind of intrigued by this. I got out from behind the desk and came out into the lobby area, and it must look really silly because I was walking up and down the hallway for about 5 minutes watching this painting, and the eyes followed me from one side of the desk to the other side. I never looked at that painting again after that.
Oddly enough, Michael Smollenberg wasn't the only one that had experiences with that painting. Some of the other staff decided that perhaps it should go. It was taken down and no longer hangs near the front desk. People need to be in the right frame of mind to hear or see or feel ghosts. Sleepwalking is one of those occasions when people may be very in tune with that sort of thing.
My husband and I are staying at the Qualicum Heritage Inn. And I go to bed about 11, and I have what I thought was the strangest dream. In the dream, I wake up in the middle of the night, and I have a stomachache, so I go and I'm looking to go and find a glass of milk. So I'm wandering through the corridors, and I come up a set of stairs, and I meet up with a small boy. He couldn't have been more than 6 or 7 years old. And he walked right up to me and looked at me, and then walked right past me, and I followed him. And I watched him walk literally through one of the doors of the hotel. I opened the door of the hotel and I walk in, and out of the corner of my eye I can see the little boy disappear and see very clearly what's inside. There was a bed with a coverlet, there was an armoire and a fireplace. So I go out of the room and I continue on. The next morning I woke up my husband and I told him about this strange, incredible experience that I'd have with this dream. And he stopped me and he told me something that just chilled me to the bone. He said that at 3 o'clock in the morning, he'd got a call from the front desk clerk of the hotel, and they'd asked him to go and find his wife, who was sleepwalking out and about through the hotel that night. When we came down and talked to the front desk, the manager, I was telling her about my strange experience and how we'd been in this room and the little boy that I'd seen. And she told us that this was the haunted room in the hotel, and that quite a few of the guests had seen a young boy walking through the hotel or heard the sounds of crying out and about that same room. Well, I was describing to her what I'd seen inside the room. The front desk manager took us back downstairs, and she showed me a picture of the room that I was describing to her. And this picture was exactly what I had seen that night, with the bed and the armoire and the fireplace. Only she let me know that this was a picture from 40 years ago, when it was the headmaster's room of what had been at that time a private boys' school. Somehow I was taken back in time to see these rooms and see this young boy from 40 years earlier. This whole experience at the Qualicum Heritage Inn was not frightening. As a matter of fact, looking forward to going back and perhaps getting another opportunity to see a tour of this amazing building in the way it was even 40 years ago.
Sleepwalking involves essentially a dream state. And if you woke up from a dream and said, I dreamt that I just won $1 million and I'm moving to Rome to visit the Pope, people would smile and say, wow, an interesting dream. That's about as much confidence or as much accuracy as we should attribute to the reports of sleepwalkers. A sleepwalker is in a state where he or she can't tell the difference between what's going on in the world around or what's happening inside the head. The two are blended together. Yes, the person can walk and avoid objects, but may, in fact, imagine the objects to be statues or trees when they're really just broom closets. So the report that someone in a sleepwalking state visited some room and could later on describe it doesn't hold much water. You have to be quite credulous to say that a sleepwalker provides a good witness for anything.
The Qualicum Heritage Inn is a popular holiday destination on central Vancouver Island. It also has the legacy of the days when it was a private boys' school from the 1930s to 1970. Some of the students who attended the Qualicum College years ago seem to be there still, just wandering the hallways and carrying out their schoolboy daily activities and pranks, just as they did a long time ago.
Many parts of the Great Lakes carry strange tales about ghosts and lost ships. One area is off of Kingston, known as Deadman Bay, and lying within the bay is Cedar Island. Two young women who were camping on the island had a very strange encounter. They were walking along the shore when they noticed a woman standing near the tower. The woman seemed to be scanning the horizon, searching for something. The first thing they noticed was her clothing, which seemed to be from at least 100 years ago. The woman finally looked at the two campers and simply vanished into thin air. The poor women quickly fled the island for good. Cedar Island has a very well-known documented ghost story going back to the 1840s. It was Irish stonemasons during the potato famine that were working on a gunnery or Cathcart tower on the island. Robert James was a young Irish stonemason who had arrived from Ireland to begin work on the tower. He was well respected amongst his workers and the townspeople of Kingston. The stonemasons worked 6 days a week. On their day off, they would arrive in Kingston and stay in barracks or local inns. It was during one of his days off that Robert went into Kingston and met a local innkeeper's daughter named Elizabeth. Robert fell in love at first sight, and Elizabeth did the same. The father thought Robert made an excellent suitor, and shortly thereafter the two were engaged to be married. Knowing he had a bright future, Robert worked tirelessly on the tower. And meanwhile, Elizabeth waited and waited for that wonderful day when the two would be wed. Yet tragedy lurked in the form of a freak storm. The men unwisely continued finishing their task before leaving for Kingston. They waited too long. A storm was quickly brewing in Deadman Bay. They all jammed into one boat. The overloaded vessel and the rough water was a determining factor for the death of most of the men. The boat capsized, and few survivors were ever found. But Robert wasn't one of them. Search boats were sent out to find the survivors. Unfortunately, Robert wasn't one of the lucky ones. Many of the bodies were located in the bay. However, the tide returned to take the bodies back out, never to be found again.
To this day, we still believe that there are some in the water, perhaps still down at the bottom, have never made it to their homes or their beloved. And this bay, which was called Hamilton Cove until then, has forever since been known as Deadman Bay.
Poor Elizabeth refused to accept the news of the death of Robert. She continued to walk down to the shoreline and gaze out over the water, waiting for his return. Although he would never return. Grief-stricken, Elizabeth refused to eat. Eventually, she perished of a broken heart. A new crew had to be hired to finish Cathcart Tower, and this is when the strange occurrences began. Workers soon reported seeing a woman on the island, especially around the tower. She seemed to be looking for something. Even soldiers stationed at Fort Henry would report seeing a mysterious woman walking along the Kingston shoreline, staring out across the bay at Cedar Island. Some campers even report seeing a man and woman together walking Cedar Island. Could it be Robert and Elizabeth? That they found one another? It would seem that the love between Robert and Elizabeth was so strong that they were united together after death in Deadman Bay.
Well, when you've got a place named Deadman Bay and you've got a legend of love and loss and so forth, again, you've set up a perfect situation for people who are inclined to want to believe in ghost stories to see things that will make them think they've seen the ghosts. If you were to change the name to Beautiful Bay and not tell anybody the legend, I'd be quite willing to bet that no one will ever report that particular ghost story, or probably they'll be unlikely to see any ghosts at all. But you set up the expectation with the name and the legend, and then the mind plays on any kind of ambiguous stimulus to fill in the details to give you your ghost.
There are other frightening legends that revolve around Deadman Bay. Sunken ships that still lie restless beneath the water. The sunken ships in Deadman Bay are so close to the surface that you can actually touch them with an oar. Many of the crews that perished with these ships in Deadman Bay were actually associated with what we call a press gang. They were young people that were taken off the streets by the British or United States officials. They were clobbered over the head, and when they awakened, they were employed in the service of Her Majesty's Navy. Legend has it that these press gangs would awaken from the depths of the water and attempt to employ anyone they could find on the surface. And legend continued to be told that when a person went missing or drowned in Deadman Bay, it was the press gangs that caught them.
There were stories that all the parents told of kids who'd wandered into the woods at night, had come too close to the bay, that the ships would, on a dark and stormy night, rise out of the bottom, and that the skeleton crews would come ashore and press gang anybody they found, haul them off, drag them into the waters, and they'd never be seen again.
Legend has it that children have actually lost their lives at night on the shore of Deadman Bay. The press gangs are awake and looking for souls.
I don't know if that was true or not, but we certainly were afraid of coming down here, especially on a dark or stormy night, as they say.
Parents all over the world make up stories to keep their kids away from situations that might be dangerous. Don't go down to the mill at night because the bogeyman might get you. It's a good way to keep children from going where they might get into trouble. And so the story of these ships just off the coast, 8 feet underwater, the story that the press gangs used to come out of them and get people and drag them underwater sounds like one of those stories. It will stay away from the water kids. And here's a good way to make you stay away. We'll tell you a scary story. But it seems to be confirmed by these boats that have been obviously there for a long time and they're underwater.
I know that when I was a child growing up along these shores that we used to try to frighten each other or scare each other into coming down here and seeing how long one would last. Any one of us who did, I wasn't among them unfortunately, quite often came back with stories of strange whisperings, calls, splashes in the water, figures being seen along the shoreline, strange lights, perhaps from lanterns of the press crew. I couldn't say myself, but then I wouldn't be down here after dark.
I think you have the combination of a cautionary tale plus some physical objects, the boats, that seem to make this thing very real and very interesting to people. But what data do you have? You've got some scuttled ships and a story, that's all. However, if people are in that area, especially late at night when we tend to be more anxious and we tend to be more prone to suggestibility, it's not surprising that someone or another from time to time will hear or see something that's interpreted as one of the members of the British press gang. There'll never be any photographs, of course, there'll never be any good evidence, but that will feed the story for the next generation. It'll go on and on.
Whether these legends originated from parents attempting to scare their children or by rum runners who are working the bay at night, the tales of Deadman Bay continue to this day. And this makes Deadman Bay one of the greatest Canadian ghost stories of all time.
Here we are in the Maritimes on the east coast of Canada. The Cellar, one of the more famous restaurants in Halifax for its hauntings, was originally a farm built by the Honorable James Butler in the 19th century. The story goes that Elizabeth, a local farm laborer, was on her way home from work. She may have been surprised by a transient who brutally killed her. The next day, her body was found, but nobody was ever convicted of this brutal, heinous crime. Many believe that it is Elizabeth's spirit who is today haunting the Cellar restaurant. Joanne Dolan, a longtime employee of the Cellar restaurant, and one of the first to openly talk about the hauntings.
My name is Joanne, and I worked here at the Cellar restaurant for a number of years. During that time, I experienced a lot of unusual things here in the restaurant, from strange noises to cold areas of the restaurant that I couldn't explain, along with seeing some strange shapes. One night I was alone and I was working downstairs in the office, and the air in the office became very cold. It was very chilly and very eerie. And I turned and I saw this misty shape. It looked like a person, but it just floated by. I became very frightened and I wanted to tell someone, so I got up and I left the office immediately. I started chatting with my other co-workers in the restaurant, and I came to discover that I wasn't the only one who was experiencing strange things here. So we all started, talking about the types of experiences we had had and shared those experiences with one another. Many of my co-workers had experienced the same sort of cold spots that I had experienced, and others actually heard voices, and the voices seemed to be whispering their names. It was very frightening for all of us.
Staff often report of hearing their names being called by some unseen presence, normally by the kitchen entrance. 2 employees were working in the restaurant on their own one evening. The lady downstairs kept hearing her name being called.
Natalie? I'll be there in a minute. Natalie? I'm just out back checking glasses. I'll be right there. Natalie? Yes, Barbara.
And finally, out of frustration, one upstairs to find out what the other wanted. At that time, the one upstairs said, "I haven't been calling your name." The 2 ladies felt very weird and finished their shift very quickly that evening.
My name's Mike Hubley. I'm the chef here at the Cellar. Been here for 5 years, and we've seen some interesting things happen. One day, I was by the computer out front. I seen something appear, which I thought was a person coming into the back dining room. So I came over to see who it was because we weren't open at the time, and there was nothing there. Just an object seemed to be there, but then it disappeared. So Joanne, who works here, also seen many of things and feels a lot of these spirits. So I went to get her.
The chef called me to tell me that he too had seen a similar apparition to the one that I had seen. And so I stepped into the cold spot and decided to step back for a bit. And when I stepped back a few steps, the temperature actually returned to normal. I had an aunt who believed in ghosts, and she actually told me once if I ever experienced any of the things that she experienced, that I should approach the ghost in a very specific way. The chef asked me if I was okay, and I said, "Could you please just leave me alone for a bit?" And I moved back into the cold spot and spoke to the ghost and told it basically that we aren't afraid of you. We know you won't hurt us, but please don't follow us home. And at that point, the air changed temperature and it became warm again. It was almost as if the presence had left the room.
The Cellar restaurant haunting involves an interesting element. That's a primary witness who says that she sees ghosts all over the place, that she's a sensitive. And then other people seem to follow her lead and say, well, yes, she saw the ghost and now we've seen it too. I guess the question is, should we believe a person who sees ghosts all the time? Is that person really sensitive? Or does it mean the person is more fantasy prone and prone to making error and mixing fantasy and reality?
Joanne's mysterious experiences continued. Furniture would move on its own. Computers would go haywire. And the cold chill would occasionally sweep through the office. This mystical image was seen a number of times, sometimes the full form moving through the cellar, other times just out of the corner of your eye. The staff has said the basement has been a focal point of many of these experiences. Many have reported constant sense of being watched or a presence around them.
I went downstairs to do inventory, and the air around me turned really cold. And then all of a sudden I felt an icy hand touch my shoulder, and I turned around and looked, and no one was there. At that point I decided I was going to confront the ghost again, and I said, "Please leave me alone." And the air actually returned back to its normal temperature.
Even though she felt she was never in any type of physical danger, the experience left her shaken for a very long time.
About 20 years ago, both of my parents worked here. There was a body supposedly found in the river out back, and they went outside, and someone actually, I'm not sure who it was my dad or someone else, drugged this bag out to see what it was, because they didn't know it was a body at the time. They opened the bag up, and there's a back door over here that was actually opened, And when they opened the bag, it was a body that was pretty decomposed. It was in bad shape. And the smell just sort of came right through the whole restaurant. It was just an awful smell. I don't know if the fans drug the smell, the odor into the building or what, but it was just a horrible smell came over the restaurant.
The body that washed up had a very violent death. We believe they were murdered. And some people believe that that is the spirit that still lingers here in the restaurant.
The cellar's longtime chef, Michael Hubley, has experienced the spirits on many occasions.
We hung up some new boards in the kitchen. That night when we left, they were all up where we hung them. Next morning I came in, I was last out, first in. The clipboard was up on the counter, which is probably 3 or 4 feet high, the counter. So for the clipboard to fall, hit the floor, and bounce onto the counter would be impossible. So somehow someone put it there, but no one was in after I left or in before me in the morning. So somehow it rose itself up to the counter.
Before we leave the restaurant at night, we always set the tables for the following morning. And when we have returned on many occasions, the tables, the objects on the tables have moved. I mean, you'll have salt and pepper shakers that have gone from one table to the next table, and chairs that have been moved away from tables. The kitchen staff has also experienced similar instances. There were occasions actually where they turned their backs and turn around and items had actually disappeared.
I've seen many a times things like pass by the door when I'm here by myself, and I'd assume that, someone came in, but there was no one here. In the mornings when I'm getting changed, I'm the only one here and the door's locked. I'd hear footsteps up here, kind of freak you out, so I'd come up thinking maybe the owners came in or something, but there'd be no one here. You'd hear the odd time a voice would call to you, say, Michael, Michael. And I thought it was one of the girls or something, and no one was calling my name.
There are times that the ghost actually seems to be protective of the restaurant. There were 2 occasions where employees had forgotten to put out the fire before they left at night. And returned in the morning to see that the fire was actually smothered out as opposed to burning out on its own. It seems as if the ghost is actually protective of the property.
We're kind of used to this now. We know that the spirit's here, we know things happen, we feel things, we see things. We just take it for granted that it's here to watch over us, I guess.
It appears that the ghost is a friendly ghost, and no one's been hurt in any of these instances. So we've just all sort of learned to live with the ghost and move on from there.